Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AANMC webinar, The Dark Side of the Moon, A Tale of Anxiety and Depression. We're going to be focusing today on naturopathic approaches to anxiety and depression with Dr. Rigo Kefferputz. But before we begin, I want to just go over some technicalities for the day. On your right-hand corner, you should see a control panel. It's in this control panel where there is a question section. We will be taking all questions for either the doctor or myself in this panel. And I will try my best to get through all of the questions today. However, we do have a pretty large turnout, and so we'll do our best to answer any questions that we can during the webinar. If by chance we're not able to get to those questions, we will take those later on, and I will give you an email address where you can send general questions to as well. And we're really happy to get started with this webinar. We'll also be talking about some of the upcoming AANMC events that we will be either attending in person or hosting via our webinar series. And so with that, I think we should get started. It's just about the hour now. So welcome, Dr. Kefferputz. I'm really excited to have this up-and-coming doc hosting this webinar today. He's been driven by his passion, and I think you can really see that by all he's done in his amount of time practicing. And so driven by this passion, he's a strong advocate of our inherent healing capacity in that which is really coveted and promoted by all NDs. In his endeavor to spread awareness about naturopathic medicine, Dr. Kefferputz presents on CTV Morning News Live, discussing a wide range of health topics that are drawn from his clinical experience and personal struggles. He takes pride in giving back to his community, both as a supervisor at the Boucher Institute of Naturopathic Medicine and as an instructor at nutritional schools and institutes. Born and raised in Europe, Dr. Kefferputz aims to discover new corners of the world and immerse himself in cultures in order to step outside of his comfort zone and continue to grow both personally and professionally as a physician. In 2015, he traveled for 3 months throughout Germany to intern at several cancer clinics and to learn more about the anthroposophical medicine and integrative care. While in 2009, he volunteered for a week at a medical placement in Nicaragua. Dr. Kefferputz is happily married to his high school sweetheart and practices at the Integrated Health Clinic in Fort Langley, British Columbia. And with that, I'm going to turn over the screen to our Dr. Rigo and be able to take your questions as they come. Thank you so much all for attending our webinar. Rigo?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you so much for having me to present this webinar today, Dr. Yanis, and to all of you viewers out there. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy days just to come and listen to what I have to say and the things I have to share. Today, I'll be discussing the dark side of the moon, a tale of anxiety and depression. And before I get into it, though, I want to do a little bit of a background information on regarding a little bit about me and a little bit more about naturopathic medicine. So, my story really begins that I was born in Berlin, so that makes me ich bin ein Berliner. But you know, growing up in Germany, you know, my entire family sat down together for a home-cooked meal, and we all ate well, though none of us really actually had any understanding of nutrition or personal health. And as a child, my health problems never worried me, and maybe it was just because it was my age and I had this disillusioned sense of safety because, you know, when I was ill, I would just stand the test of time and all would be well. But I really noticed that the biggest health challenges I started facing was after high school when I first went to university at the McGill University. And being an immigrant, English never was my strong suit, and so therefore I kind of was prone more towards the sciences. And so I pursued a degree as a bachelor in physiology. However, being at McGill University, that's when a lot of health challenges started to approach me. I noticed that I started having a lot of trouble sleeping. I was having a lot of sleep onset and sleep maintenance, insomnia. This was also the first time I started having eczema on my face, something that I never truly understood, and I had no idea food was related to it in the first place. And this is kind of after my 4-year university degree. I thought I would go into medical school, and I put myself forward for many different interviews at different universities in order to become a medical doctor. And the more and more I had to answer questions regarding about why I wanted to become a medical doctor, the more and more I became disillusioned with the idea of it, because I realized maybe this is not the true way that I wanted to practice. Not that it was right or wrong, it just wasn't for me. It just didn't spoke to me. And this is where I signed myself up to become a prospective student at the Boucher Institute of Naturopathic Medicine, which is located in New Westminster, beautiful British Columbia. And in Boucher, that is really where I managed to face a lot of challenges in my life. You know, going through university and having fun and going through the struggles. But once I was in naturopathic medicine, going through the Boucher Institute, I all of a sudden had to start facing all the realities of my life. Because I find that when you become a medical doctor or a naturopathic doctor or any sort of healthcare practitioner, most importantly, you've got to deal with your stuff in your life. And that can sometimes be extremely challenging and very confrontational, but it is also unbelievably important. During my tenure at the Boucher Institute of Naturopathic Medicine, I also had the opportunity to join NDI, Natural Doctors International, and spend about 2 weeks abroad in Nicaragua on a little island called Ometepe to help about 200 to 300 people with their health concerns. And it was a very eye-opening experience on how natural medicine can even make its way to the forefronts of around the world, where it's practiced actually in many, many different societies. So after about 4 years, I started going into naturopathic practice. And if anyone goes into naturopathic practice after spending 4 years going through education, I highly suggest a mandatory vacation. And that is exactly what I got up to. I ended up marrying my best friend, and we traveled to India for 2 months. And it was a wonderful learning opportunity and a wonderful cultural integration and experience. And I highly recommend for anybody to take a little time off before they decide to dedicate the rest of their time in practice. But the reality of the matter was that naturopathic practice wasn't all easy breezy and beautiful initially. I realized that it was actually a very, very steep learning curve, because I was sheltered in a way through education. I never really had a chance to hold a job on my own for a year. I was going through university, through high school, and then through Boucher in order to get my degree. And so I never really had the chance to deal with some of the realities of life, whether it was taxes and accounting and how to run a business and how to maintain integrity throughout all of that, and as well as how to advertise and most of all, to be authentic, to be myself, to find my style, I like to call it. Because when you first come out, you got to find your authentic true self. And I felt like even though I had a chance through the Naturopathic Institute to do a lot of, you know, looking at myself and seeing all the wrongs and the rights and the things I need to work on, I realized that who I am at home and who I am at the office were two different people. And they weren't aligned with one another. It was a dichotomy that I was living. And I think that was actually the biggest struggle for me, because I realized that naturopathic medicine is a very personal medicine. And it's me and the patient inside the office. And I think in order to develop that personal relationship that I hope lasts for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, passing down generations of family, it's important that a patient sees me for who I am, for who I truly am, but also, of course, sees me as a physician. Because patients don't exactly see a naturopathic doctor. They come to see you. There's something that you have, some flair that you have, some style, some identity that they can connect with. And I think it's important that you truly resonate with who you are. And I was having a tough time doing that, because I always considered myself having to be two different people, one inside the office and one on a personal level. And so after about 2 years, I felt like I needed a break again. I needed to figure myself out, figure out how I wanted to practice, why I was doing what I was doing. And as mentioned, I went on this, what I like to call a pilgrimage, because it's a way to find yourself. And I went traveling through Europe for 4 months with my wife to find out everything that life had to offer, and more so about how I wanted to practice, which gave me the opportunity to witness many different physicians in anthroposophical clinics and integrative clinics and throughout Germany, to learn from their style and learn how they meet people and how they practice. And it gave me a real eye-opener as to how I wanted to approach things. So currently, when I came back, starting last August, I joined the Integrated Health Clinic, and it has been a wonderful experience, because it's been nothing but collegial support. There's about 9 naturopathic doctors of us, which means there's a wealth of knowledge inside the whole clinic for us to share around. And now I've really had the chance to go through a self-discovery, find out my voice, find out how I wanted to speak, find out the true self, my style. Because I noticed when I first started practicing, I was picking up bits and pieces from my mentors, from things that I've seen, but I still haven't sort of convoluted it together to make it truly who I am. So why naturopathic medicine? I mean, why did I get into naturopathic medicine? And there's three main reasons. One is because it's a lifestyle. Regardless of whether you're a naturopathic doctor for 5 years or whether you choose to do it for the rest of your life. If there was a time and a point where you chose not to be a naturopathic doctor anymore, whether it's in your 50s, 60s, or 70s, well, the things that you've learned, you can apply them for the rest of your life. I can apply them to help my parents as they're going through aging. I can help my friends when they're going through personal struggles. I've had a chance to work on myself, which makes it that much easier for me to meet and connect and truly listen and hear other people's struggles and other people's concerns when they're moving through life. I can help my children, my children's children, and it's a way of life, I consider it, right? I mean, isn't that what we truly aspire, is to really gain 100% out of our life, to truly elevate or frame our way of living, to get the most out of life and truly experience everything on a mental, emotional, and physical level. And that's what makes it naturopathic medicine so wonderful, as it is for a lifestyle. And the second thing I briefly touched upon was that it's personal. It's personal medicine. It's not cookie cutter medicine. It's not, you can't just throw 10 people in the room and give them the same treatment. No, it's personal. Every single person that you meet is unique. There's no one like them. Every one of us has a unique fingerprint, a unique digestive tract, a unique liver, a unique way of growing up, unique family dynamics, unique ways of thinking. And therefore, it's so important that as a naturopathic physician, that you meet people where they are, because it's a very personal medicine. And sometimes you have to really allow people to be vulnerable, to see them as they are. And last but not least, it's a toolbox. And this is one of the most favorite things for me, and probably also for my patients, is that when I look inside my toolbox, all the tools, all the modalities, all the therapies that are available to me, there's a range of them. Not every single patient wants to have the same treatment. Some people might enjoy acupuncture. They really believe in the meridians and the energetic flow of these meridians. However, some people might not like needles. Well, then what about nutrition? That might speak for some people. And for others, it might be pharmaceutical medicine, right? As there's a context and a place for them. Others might prefer physical medicine, such as hydrotherapy, TENS machines, chiropractics. And others might prefer aromatherapy. We can use IV therapies. We can dispense bioidentical hormones. I mean, you can truly have fun with this. And that's what I love so much about naturopathic medicine, that I'm not confined by my regulatory body to just prescribe pills or just to cut something out. You know, there's so much more to what we can do as naturopathic medicine that might speak to patients on many different aspects. So what does my weekly routine look like? So there's definitely some writing, emails predominantly, not my favorite part of the weekly routine, to be honest. But there's a fair amount of writing, whether it is articles, emails, or even just writing up some notes or treatment plans for patients. I do have a clinical practice, as I mentioned, at the Integrated Health Clinic in Fort Langley, and I work about approximately 3 to 4 days. Because I live in North Vancouver, it's about a 40-minute drive, which may be normal for some of you in Toronto to come into the city, but for me, I hate driving that long. And so when I do go to work, I work all the way from 7:30 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. And that's just because I don't want to waste time going back and forth for a shorter day. I do partake in several speaking engagements, whether it is at local communities, at the Juicery, which is a little juicery bar that I'm affiliated with, at art galleries. I do have some speaking engagements at CTV Morning News. I still remember 2 years ago, the first time I came on, that was pretty scary. But again, all part of stepping outside the box, right? Challenging yourself. One of the things I started doing this year was teaching and supervising. I realized I have a real knack for helping others out and really trying to share my knowledge, my expertise, my struggles with people so that they can learn from them. So I teach at the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition and the Institute of Holistic Nutrition. And it's kind of great to teach in a field where people are of the same ideals and same mindset. So you have some of the same conversations and really get to really truly see people where they are. And supervising. I supervise at the Boucher Institute of Naturopathic Medicine, and honestly, I love it. Primarily because it's not just that, I find actually that the students teach me more clinical knowledge, whereas I teach them much more clinical experience. It's so wonderful. One hand washes another ordeal, and I get a lot of great feedback from it, primarily because I try to teach the students what it is like to be a doctor, the ups and the downs, you know, finding your style, finding your voice, finding your authentic self. And that's really difficult to do sometimes when you're going through schooling and all you're thinking about is, I just got to pass these things right now and go through practice. Fitness is a major part. I'm happy to say now, after many years of struggling, that I cannot live without working out. It's just, I just know that after a day or two, if I haven't gone to the gym or had a good run or played a hard game of squash, I just feel it in my body. I just feel it in my mind. I'm just not there. I just don't feel as happy. I just don't feel as, you know, engaging in life. And last but not least, family. I mean, I think it's really important that when you look back at all the things that are going on in your life, that family is of utmost importance. Those are people that are always there in your corner and will always be there. And speaking of family, that's my family on the right-hand side, my wife, as well as my little dog, Vene de Bene. He's the love of my life, and I never understood dog owners until I had my own. So I'm very happy to have one. So this slide is all about work-life balance. It sounds like a paradox. It's a very difficult thing to maintain at times. And so there's a few tips and tricks that I've learned from my fair share of work-life balance that I want to share with you. First of all, don't ever confuse the urgent with the important. Just because something pops up, that doesn't mean immediately that it's urgent. Just because your boss tells you you got to do this doesn't mean it's immediately the first thing that you have to do. Sometimes it's just really important to focus on the important things in life, the things that truly matter, before you keep jumping onto what you think might be the urgent, which might not very well be. Because sometimes procrastination can be a wonderful gateway into urgency and not what the important things really matter with. Second thing is schedule time for yourself and your loved ones. I mean, you are the master of your life. You are the navigator of your ship. I mean, you steer the course where you want to go. A lot of time people tell me, oh, you know what, doctor, I don't have enough time to do this. And I feel like that happens a lot nowadays. I mean, partially it's true because we live in a world that's just moves so bloody quick. And so we always tell ourselves we don't have enough time and we don't have enough time. But consequently, because we say that to ourselves, you never will have enough time. If you come with that sort of attitude and that sort of mentality, and you start your day off with that sort of thought, you'll never have enough time. The next thing you know, you're running from A to B to C to A to B to C. And next thing you know, 20 years gone by and you wonder where the time went. So I think it's really important that you schedule time aside, because life can sometimes be distracting, especially nowadays with all the technology and the gadgets and the phones and the computers and every single advertising billboard that wants your attention. Third thing, respect your boundaries. I mean, I feel like most of us are pretty good at respecting other boundaries, but we have very little self-respect for our own boundaries. And I think there's an important word, and that is no. Learn the strength to say no. And I think sometimes that's a very difficult thing, especially in Canada, because I sometimes find there's this inherent sense, this British sense of being proper, of wanting to please, of not wanting to be overbearing, overburdening, or to offend anybody. And so commonly we always say yes, yes, yes to anything. And I think it's sometimes very important to say no. Because remember, when you say no to someone else, you really say yes to yourself. And that's really important. Next thing is organize work accordingly to your routine. Yeah, routine, it's a gift and a curse. I think it's sometimes absolutely wonderful, but it sometimes makes the time go by way too quickly because we don't experience new things in our life as a result of it. Always stay present. That's something that very resonates for me because I'm a very left brain dominant person. I spend a lot of time in the future and a lot of time dwelling in the past. And I noticed that when I was doing that, that was my way of trying to be somewhat efficient, but I truly noticed that I never really was present in anything in my life. I wondered where time went because I was never truly enjoying and being in that very bliss moment right now, whereas my head was always somewhere else. And most importantly, follow your values, not those of society. Follow the things that truly matter to you. I mean, commonly we get manipulated and influenced by media and by billboards and by even our friends and especially our family dynamics, right? Things we get taught very early in life. I think it's important that there comes a certain point when you start following your own values, you start developing your own guidelines, your own ideologies. So what's a typical day in the office look like for me? Patient demographics, to be honest, I'd say anything under the spectrum of the sun, but I see more commonly a lot of the male population. And I think that is primarily because I work in a clinic where there's 8 female naturopathic doctors and only 2 male naturopathic doctors. And so I think there's a greater sense of the reception to push male patients towards me. Another thing that's important that I mention in every single one of my visits is the word doctor. The word doctor comes from the Greek word of doser. It means teacher. And what I share is that for me to be a very good teacher, I really need to share with my patients everything that I think is important to them in regards to medicine so that they can make a very, very informed and well-educated decision on how they want to tackle their health. Because it's all about informed consent. It's all about choice and making that choice that speaks to you. Thirdly is working collaboratively. Many times people think as naturopathic doctors, we hate medical doctors, we hate the medical system. And sometimes patients come to the office and they start trying to relate to us on how their medical doctor is not doing the right thing. And I think that there's a misunderstanding there because we really believe in working collaboratively, having an integrative approach. That's, 2 eyes on your case is good, but 4 eyes is even better. And 6 eyes, well, that's the cream of the crop. Working collaboratively, and what I mean is that I ask every single one of my patients for their permission to write a letter to their physician to introduce myself. Actually, no, never mind. I never really introduced myself. I introduced the patient to them about what I'm seeing, about what's going on. So we can start that line of communication and have that transparency so that they're always on board to understand what I'm doing, and I'm always on board to understand what they're doing. Because many times, when it comes to the medical community, they're just not up on what they're down on, or they're just down on what they're not up on. And so it's important that education, it's just a big part of education. There's a whole lot of things that I miss that they might pick up, and they might miss some things that I might pick up. So collaborative care is really the best thing to offer when it comes to medicine. Fourth thing is really meeting the patients where they are. Honestly, and actually that leads into the 5th part, the complete transparency portion, is that being completely transparent. Making sure there's no ego in the room, and most importantly, that the patient realizes that they will not hurt my feelings if they don't agree with something. And I always tell them that, if I come up with something and I do something, or I suggest a certain treatment and you're not on board with it, or you don't like it, or you don't think it's working for you, or you have apprehensions, tell me about it. You will not hurt my feelings. You will not offend me. It's a bloody waste of time otherwise, and we're just talking past each other and not at each other. And it's your health, and you're here for your health. So I think that's of utmost priority. And last but not least is sowing the seeds for the future. Allowing a patient to really know what's the next step. What is the next step? After step A, is it step B? If step B didn't work, is it step C? Planning for the future, knowing ahead of what to do. I think that's really important, especially as it is for patients to know what they're doing and just knowing that they're well taken care of. I think that's a very important component. Some tips I have for practice success. First one is challenge yourself. I mean, if life isn't a challenge and if life doesn't get risky, then you might not be learning and might not be having a lot of fun on the way. Like I said, sometimes life passes by so quickly, especially as we get older, because we stop challenging ourselves, because we stop experiencing new things like children do. Children have, I think 10 new experiences every day about things that they didn't know, things they didn't see. And nowadays, as we get older, we become like comfort food eaters. We become comfort do people. We always do things that are comfortable and things that we're used to and things that are safe, because we don't want to upset ourselves, or we don't want to, by any chance, worry ourselves about anything going wrong. And that can sometimes make a very pretty boring lifestyle at times. Maintaining integrity is another big important, is that always maintain integrity. Walk into situations with your head held high and walk out of situations with your head held high. Discover your style. I talked a lot about that, discovering who you are and how you want to practice. Have an immediate presence. I know it can sometimes be a double-edged sword. I mean, I was resisting to go on Facebook for the longest time and Twitter and all this. And but you know, truth of the matter is we live in a world of technology nowadays. You know, 90% of our friends are on Facebook, and Facebook is a free service that's offered that one can advertise on. I just think that you do it appropriately and that you just put yourself out there and then you let people know about what naturopathic medicine is and how you work as a naturopathic doctor. You know, we really always have this idea that we know or understand what a plumber does or what an actor does or what a real estate agent does. And as a naturopathic doctor, I many times assume that people know what a naturopathic doctor does, and it's not true. People have no idea until you tell them. So I think that's where the media presence really comes in. A referral network, well, that kind of speaks back to collaborative care. When I write that letter and I open that line of communication, if a patient sees results and the doctor sees results as a result of the patient getting better, well, perchance that doctor might refer to me another patient, and then all of a sudden we have a relationship that surpasses the patient's, where we can start working collaboratively together on maybe other cases too. And last but not least is nurture yourself. You got to nurture yourself to nurture others. You got to take care of yourself to take care of others. You can't walk in there in practice and feel exhausted or feel like you're undergoing an emotional havoc. And looking forward, I mean, I really do look forward to having a little bit more media relations. I always talk about writing a book. It still hasn't gotten me anywhere yet, but I hope so. And in terms of naturopathic medicine, I really hope that we somehow or some way become part of the Canadian public health system again, or at least manage to take the burden of the public health system, because the way it's working currently is not working, it is not sustainable, and it's going to change in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. Another thing is that health is passed forward by generations. You know, there used to be an idea that parents teach kids on how to eat. I'm noticing more and more kids are teaching parents how to eat. It's the new way of thinking. You know, even the kids are learning and understanding what good food is and what not good food is. And then some advice I have for some of you prospective students out there that are considering going into naturopathic medicine: keep growing. Don't ever stop. Discover your voice, discover who you are. Some people have a beautiful voice. They've got some wonderful things to say, but they shut themselves up. They close themselves off. And there can be a bright light inside and no one would ever know about it. Take time for yourself. Don't forget, you always come first. And most of all, find mentors in your life. Find people that you can learn from. Find people that support you. Find people that give you an idea, give you perspective on how to approach things in life. So that was my shtick. That was a little spiel about me, and most of all about naturopathic medicine. Let's get into the meats and potatoes of why we're here today. Mental health, primarily the tale of anxiety and depression, a little presentation on the dark side of the moon. So mental health, what does that really compromise? I mean, if we think about stress nowadays, I mean, humans die from stress nowadays because the brain can primarily not differentiate between what's reality and what's imagination. I mean, there's a quote by William Shakespeare that says, "Nothing's true, but thinking makes it so." And this really highlights the power of that whole placebo and nocebo, mind over matter effect. Even the word placebo now has been replaced in many ways as called the meaning response. You know, when you bring meaning to things, there's just something so much more beautiful about it. There's something that gives back to you in a way. And it's all in the brain, and you are the eye of the beholder. You are in charge of yourself. And I understand that what is anxiety or fear-provoking for one person can be seen as completely harmless or exciting for the next person, such as, I don't know, the fear of flying or cliff jumping or whatnot. And what's interesting also is that when they've done studies in rats, for example, if they have rats running in a labyrinth, well, they experience more joy in life than those just running on a wheel. And I think we can attest to that running through a labyrinth would be much more fun than just running on a wheel all day. So it says a lot to the interaction we have with our environment. So anxiety. Globally, 1 in 13 people suffer from anxiety. And 30% of Canadians suffer from sleep issues attributed to stress and anxiety. I think I definitely fell underneath that when I was at McGill University. I mean, and I love that little quote by Charlie Brown. Even my anxieties have anxieties, right? Anxiety disorders cost the U.S. more than $42 billion a year. Almost 1/3 of the country's $140 billion total mental health bill. And the thing is, it's not uncommon for someone with anxiety disorder to also suffer from depression or vice versa. Nearly half of those diagnosed with depression are also diagnosed with some sort of anxiety disorder. And the thing is, fear or anxiety is a common natural emotion, but it's all about moderation, right? We always ask and aim for moderation in our life. So when it gets out of control, it can lead to many different mental disorders. So for example, like generalized anxiety is a chronic fear with no particular trigger, or post-traumatic stress often occurs when a situation or stimulus reminds us of something or someone or some traumatic experience we underwent long ago, but then all of a sudden it seems to be present again, once again, due to something that triggered us. Many times, patients that I see are always in a continuous fight or flight response. This is fearful inner impulse that they're always feeling like they're in this survival mode, in a way that they're always having to be on edge. They just don't have the abilities to sometimes calm down and just relax. I think that says a lot, speaks a lot also to the left brain, right? We know the right brain is a very creative, free-flowing, imaginative, and present portion of our brain. And by present, I mean it allows us to be present. Whereas the left brain, it's a prehistoric reptilian type of brain. It's the one that always worries about what's going to happen in the future and dwells on the past. It is logical, it is strategic, it is controlling, and it never, ever really allows us to be in the present. And I think even the lifestyle we live nowadays and the world that we are a part of really promotes that left brain dominant thinking. You know, when you just think about something and next thing you know, you have gone down the rabbit hole of fear for the last 20, 30 minutes, and guess what? You're not feeling any better as a result of it. So that being said, goes back to a really important quote: listen to your body, know your limit, play within it. Don't all of a sudden start thinking about something and just trail off on the rabbit or the goose chase with worries. That never has helped anybody. And now, moving from anxiety to depression, 11% of adults, so 3.2 million Canadians, have symptoms consistent with depression. And 49% of people with depression will never, ever visit a doctor about it. I think that speaks a lot, again, to, I mean, we live in a society nowadays where everyone's always fine. You know, you always ask people, how are you doing? Oh, I'm good. I'm fine. Oh, I'm not too bad, but hey, you're not too good either, right? And I think it says a lot about people never wanting to be seen as vulnerable. You know, especially in British Columbia at times, sometimes people feel like they can't make friends, and that's primarily because sometimes, and that's the beautiful thing about friends, is because around friends you can be vulnerable. And sometimes when you are vulnerable about a person, that person themselves all of a sudden becomes vulnerable as well, and you actually get to see each other for who you truly are for one another. And I think that's really important, and it says a little about people not seeking out support, not reaching out to their friends, not visiting their doctor about it. It doesn't surprise me whatsoever, because we live in a society where, like, we don't want to burden anybody. We just take on the burden ourselves. And isn't that what friends are for? To share the grief, to help you out. So, and the thing is, this isn't just affecting the elderly or the adults. This is affecting all the way down to the children and the adolescents. You know, and many times they might not have the tools, the same tools we've had over the bulk of years to deal with certain things. So I think it's important that, you know, even when we talk about Bell, Let's Talk, and mental health awareness, those are huge components so people understand that there's support out there. I want to touch a little bit on the chemistry of anxiety and depression. Now, there's something called neurotransmitters. They're like little chemical brain messengers that travel between neurons, and they hang out within the synapse. And the synapse is a connection between one neuron and the next. And there's one neurotransmitter that's called serotonin. It's that feel-good neurotransmitter. And many depressive patients produce an insufficient amount of it. So commonly, when we start giving patients SSRIs or SNRIs, these are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And what it means is that they inhibit or they prevent the breakdown of serotonin so that there's more inside the brain for our body to use. Hence, we get that really good, happy feeling. And then, of course, we also have the anxiety and people's sleep disorders, and they often lack something called GABA aminobutyric acid. And that is actually a calming down neurotransmitter. It allows us to calm down. It shuts off the brain chatter. I like to call it monkey brains. You know, the monkeys that are always thinking, always doing, and always grabbing for things. That's what I remember my brain looked like when I was sleeping. So I know that GABA was a huge success for me in terms of helping me calm down. And the interesting thing about it is that many of these neurotransmitters, we always think about the brain, but we don't often commonly think about the gut, and how actually a lot of the neurotransmitters are produced in our gut. And why is that? Because we eat food. That is nutrition, that is fuel for life. And through these building blocks of food, we manage to produce these brain chemicals. About 80% of serotonin actually gets produced in our gastrointestinal tract. And so therefore, it's not uncommon for patients that have gut troubles, right? Whether it's IBS, a lot of gas and bloating, alternating constipation, diarrhea, colitis, to get sick very frequently, but also to feel down most of the time because they're not adequately producing enough of that serotonin. And that being said, it goes back to being the eye of the beholder. Man cannot remake himself without suffering, for he's both the marble and the sculptor. So we always are continuously working on ourselves, and that means confronting things that are going on. Have you ever noticed that sometimes you're feeling upset or down, you reach to watch TV or you go watch a movie? I remember when I was doing long distance with my, I guess, wife, now girlfriend back then, the last day, the very last day before I had to leave, we would always go to the cinema. It wasn't even like planned or anything. We just did it because it was that bliss of not having to think about leaving here for those 2 hours. And many times, sometimes you don't want to deal with something. And so what do? You start self-medicating with little quick fixes like coffee, 5-hour energy drinks, Red Bulls, television. All of a sudden, you're feeling a little too excited. So after a day of work, for example, then you want to calm yourself down. So maybe then you start drinking some alcohol, especially in British Columbia. Marijuana is very prevalent. So a lot of people start reaching out to marijuana as every single excuse there is to use it. You even have people that smoke cigarettes, right? We know that nicotine in low doses picks you up and high doses calms you down. So we're continuously self-medicating, and it's continuously shutting down and producing different natural biochemicals and unnatural ones we consume through what we do. And so the brain really can't handle all of it, and it literally starts burning itself out. And you can actually see those bright spots if you do an MRI on the brain. So what about treatments? This is, again, the great part, the toolbox, the things we get to do. There's so much we can do for mental health, for anxiety, for depression, because what you put in is what you get out. You know, the common term, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. You are what you eat, and also you are more than what you absorb. So food wins always over no food, but it's always about making an informed decision and being knowledgeable about the things that you can take and things you can do. And I think this is where naturopathic medicine is absolutely top of the line in terms of helping you find out if you have any nutritional deficiencies. The way I describe it usually is that imagine that you are your favorite car, right? Whether it is a Range Rover, a Lamborghini, a Ferrari, a Porsche, a Honda Civic, it doesn't matter. If you love that car, you're going to want to put good fuel into it. You're going to put probably the best fuel into it. And that's the same way you got to see the body. The body is just a vehicle for life. It's what carries you throughout life. And I'll tell you, many people try to change their bodies, but it's the one body you've been given this life. So you better start loving it, because there's nothing else you can do about it but take good, clean care of it and love it for everything that it is. And this is, again, talking about treatments and things that work for the body. Well, you know, if someone's feeling extremely depressed and it's affecting their quality of life, well, then perchance you might want to choose using SSRIs or SNRIs, but perhaps maybe you want to first do it through nutrition. Maybe about meditation. And we know how important meditation is and how much of an impact it has on people's well-being. We know that botanical medicine has lots of different plants and herbs to offer to allow people to get better. So first of all, let's talk about one, nutrition, omega fatty acids. See, our diet is really deficient in omega-3 fatty acids. So it's always wise for you to eat more cold water fish, such as salmon, herring, sardines. And most importantly, remember, the fish oil is always in the skin of the fish. So make sure to eat the skin of that salmon. But I understand, of course, some of us are vegetarians. So then I suggest, well, why don't you increase your intake of seaweed, walnuts, flax seeds? I commonly tell the patients to grind up some flax seeds and take a tablespoon once or twice a day. The thing is, you can sprinkle it over dinner, porridge, cereals, salads. You can even make something seed cycling snack balls, little seeds snack balls that you can take on the go. Right? It just requires a little bit more preparation on your behalf. See, the thing is, our brain is largely made up of fat, and so our body really needs that diet rich in omega-3 so we can produce those neurotransmitters. Next up, we got fermented foods. Now, it's interesting. There's a recent research article that came out that shows that eating fermented foods such as yogurt, sauerkraut, pickles, kimchi markedly reduces social anxiety and stress hormones. And I think it speaks a lot to the microbiome. The microbiome is really our gut flora. It stands for all those healthy bacterial cells, or at least the balance of bacterial cells inside of the environment, which is our gut, how much bacterial cells we have in there. And they play an essential role in mental health, and they really do dictate the way we feel. So, you know, if you have had a common exposure to antibiotics, you eat a lot of sugar, you've had a concussion, which of course affects your gut, or you've had traveler's diarrhea, gastroenteritis, that's going to really affect your bacterial levels inside your gut, your microbiome. And so commonly as naturopathic doctors, we address that. You know, there's so many patients nowadays that suffer from candida overgrowth, or even more so, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where the bacteria is overgrowing, which technically in one way wouldn't make sense, but if you had a small little room and there was 2 people sitting in it, not a big deal. But if you've got 20 people in the room, it's going to feel a little congested and full. And that's the same way the gut works when it comes to probiotics or the microbiome. This one's really important, and a lot of us are failing at doing this control correctly, is glycemic control. Glycemic stands for blood sugar. And we always go on a blood sugar roller coaster where we have coffee on empty stomachs, where we then tend to eat processed carbohydrates such as muffins or just plain pastas, white rice, or just have sandwiches. It's so important for us to maintain a good blood sugar balance at including some of the other macronutrients such as protein, fiber, and fat. I suggest every single person have all 4 of those: carbs, proteins, fiber, fats in every single meal. And it doesn't have to be a big meal. It could just be a small snack. Because if you take a look at all the top lines of this roller coaster here, those are all the top lines where their blood sugar is spiking. And when your blood sugar spikes, that kind of stresses your brain out, and your brain has to release insulin. And if you have to release insulin 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a day because you acutely push your blood sugar up high, well, that causes insulin resistance. And that's the first way somebody gets diabetes. But if you're on the other spectrum where you always skip meals and you never have sugar, well, then your blood sugar curve is at the bottom of the roller coasters, and your brain actually is freaking out again, because your brain is the only organ in your body that cannot store sugar. It can't store energy, and so it needs it from the foods that we eat. So it's really important that you have balanced eating to keep your blood sugar stable all day long, because many of us, we get hangry. You know I get hangry. You know that word when you're hungry and then you get angry at people? Yeah, that's me right here. And I always get upset because when I go to see my family and they can tell that I'm getting angry, they immediately are like, let's feed Rigo. He's got to get fed because we want to have a good time today. So again, really important, blood sugar. Something super simple that you can regulate. Having something to eat every 3 to 4 hours is a perfect way of doing so. Lean protein. Protein is really important because it breaks down into amino acids, which your brain, of course, uses to make more of those brain chemicals we talked about. And again, protein allows your blood sugar curve to be more stable by allowing those carbs to be broken down slowly and absorbed slowly into your body. And then having whole grains, right? We know that there's a difference between white breads and then whole grain sprouted breads, because simple carbohydrates like white bread, rice, pastas, chips, candy, that can make your mood worse. And like I said, it spikes your blood sugar. It's similar to your brain as taking drugs. It's a similar type of reaction that your brain has to go through. So you always want to make sure that you understand the glycemic index of foods, and you make sure that you eat complex carbohydrates. You know, whole wheat products, bulgur, oats, wild rice, barley, beans, soy, things like that. Last but not least, you want to make sure you get some color in your diet, fruits and vegetables. I commonly always suggest people eat local fruits. Why? Because it's good for the environment, it's good for your wallet, and the chances of less pesticides. And most of all, local fruits, as we live in, here, I live in Vancouver, it's a very temperate climate. I imagine Toronto might be the same. We don't grow bananas, we don't grow pineapples, even oranges. I remember in the wintertime, if you got an orange for Christmas, I mean, you were the bomb. You were the coolest kid in town. Like, who got an orange for Christmas? I mean, somebody had to bring that over. And nowadays, I mean, sky's the limit. You can choose to eat anything you want. And I think sometimes that can be more of a burden because a lot of people nowadays, they reach for a banana for their snack or for their breakfast. And banana is a very simple carbohydrate that gets broken down very quickly and it's just pure sugar. So it's important to include also some green vegetables like spinach, romaine, turnip, mustard greens, broccoli, foods high in folic acids. Because you notice that B vitamins are really important, and deficiency of them has been linked to higher rates of depression, fatigue, and insomnia. I honestly think Popeye was onto something when he needed a can of spinach to get the strength. So I think it's really important that you get some of those green colors inside of you as well. They all carry high amounts of phytonutrients, which are these natural chemicals inside food that you just can't get out of the pill. Like I mentioned, relationships. That's really important. I think it's primarily because in our busy lives, it feels more difficult to put the effort in nowadays to meet people. And that's only because we compare it to texting and Facebook chatting. But when we meet in person, we get inspired and refreshed in a much more powerful way. And we can use that extra energy to perform at a higher level and just feel generally so much greater. It's interesting to note that there's even a sense of isolationism, where the percentage of households that occupied by one or more person more than doubled from 6% in 1972 to 12% in 2008. Most of us live alone since our population is aging and we're having fewer children, but it's so common nowadays to live in an apartment building and not even know your neighbors. Whereas I think if you went back 50 years, you know, like your neighbors would take care of your kids if you were gone for the day, or the whole block sort of all the apartments had your back if you needed anything or I had to ask. Nowadays, it's not much so. We feel connected, and at the same time, there's a complete lack of connection. Now, speaking of anxiety, depression, this is where kind of medication comes in. About 1 in 10 Americans aged 12 and over takes antidepressant medications. So if you take a look at the graph, you notice here 12 years and over, 12 to 17, 18 to 39, and that's just from 2005 to 2008. I mean, we don't even know what it looks like from 2008 to 2016, or at least I don't have the stats with me to take a look at that right now. And we used to think that it was just, oh, well, you know, antidepressant medication might be for a certain race or a certain ethnicity, but we also noticed that the poverty level doesn't make much of a difference. If you make less than 100% of poverty level, look at that. The value is actually lower than those that make much more. So it's really, again, about having a choice and knowing how to medicate yourself appropriately. The thing about medication also is that many of us develop tolerance to it. So when you take a look at SSRIs or SNRIs and a person's already at the maximum dose, well, then all of a sudden they're thinking about putting you on another medication or switching that medication. You know, especially SSRIs and SNRIs tend to have a big tolerance threshold, whereas tricyclic antidepressants like amitriptyline do not. But again, it's always a choice, and a patient has to make a choice that works for them. But my point is that nature also has medicine to offer. You know, if you just go to PubMed, and PubMed, by honestly, if you don't know that website, you got to start checking it out, because it is the one website where you can find a research paper about anything. And if I just typed in hypericum and depression, that gives me 668 scientific papers. Hypericum is a plant, it's St. John's wort, and it's commonly used antidepressant properties and stimulating serotonin. It's also passion flower example, which I'll show you in a research study that was as effective as oxazepam, an anti-anxiety drug medication in treating generalized anxiety disorder. And let's not forget the power of meditation, where we know that the effects of mindful meditation affects our brain networks and reflects on neuronal mechanisms in chemistry. So here are some options about some natural things that we use commonly that help people calm down. For example, green tea. Green tea, the benefit is that it has caffeine. We know caffeine increases serotonin output, which is nice, but it also has L-theanine, which is an amino acid that's found primarily in the green tea plant. It binds glutamic acid glutamate receptors and has been considered to cause anti-stress effects by inhibiting cortical neuronal excitation. What it means, it just tends to calm the brain down. That's why I think to myself, green tea is much better way to go to lift yourself up and feel calm than have some of that frantic, buzzing energy of coffee. There's been some clinical trials of rhodiola rosea. Rhodiola is an adaptogen. What that means is it's an adaptogenic herb. It allows you to give you energy when you're feeling down, and it allows to calm you down when you're feeling up. So of course, it's really important for mild, moderate depression, anxiety, burnout, fatigue. Why? Because how our body feels at times affects how our mind feels, and how our mind feels at times affects how our body feels. So in order to mitigate the symptoms, we commonly use rhodiola, especially because nowadays we live in a world where you got to be running to stand still. Everybody's burning the candle at both ends, and many people speak about it proudly. If you tell people nowadays that you didn't do anything today, it's almost frowned upon. Even if you take a look at like North Korea and Japan, and even actually business sectors here in Vancouver, and I'm sure New York and other cities, it's frowned upon if you leave on time. You have to work late. You have to work later than your boss. You have to show up before you even have to show up. It's a world nowadays where you have to work so hard to make ends meet. And I think that's where you need support. That's why if you're not taking certain lifestyle measures, then you start having taking some supplements. And it's really important to note that supplements stands to supplement your lifestyle. It's not to replace your lifestyle. It's meant to support your lifestyle. So if your lifestyle is not doing it for you and you're not taking care of yourself, then you need to supplement it. But if you are managing to meditate and have good interactions and be mindful of the things you think and the things you feel and the things you do, well, then you might not have to supplement as much or at all, perhaps. Talking a little bit about chemical mechanisms, I want to mention briefly how St. John's wort increases serotonin neurotransmission, which is of course to improve mood. And then you have passion flower, which directly activates GABA. Passion flower is really important. And then there's valerian, right? For some people, they like to use valerian to help them sleep, which again produces GABA neurotransmission, which is important for people that have anxiety and that can't fall asleep. This is particularly important as to this slide that I'm sharing here, which was a study done that showed that people with generalized anxiety disorder were treated with passion flower extract or oxazepam. So oxazepam is an anti-anxiety medication, and passion flower is also a natural anti-anxiety medication we use. If you take a look at the German graph, it shows you here actually that oxazepam was way more effective in the first week. But then if you actually gave it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and 4 weeks, it was just as effective as passion flower without all the bloody side effects. You don't need all the side effects with it. It just requires you to be a bit more patient. But sometimes patients don't want to be patient. Sometimes we need a magic bullet. We need it now. And I think, again, that's where it's really important for us as physicians to share this information appropriately for patients so that they can make a choice as they see fit. One thing that's also important to note was that there's a pharmacological study that showed the herbal drug combinations of St. John's wort and passion flower. And what they noticed was that passion flower increases the effect of St. John's wort on serotonin in a dose-dependent manner. What that means is that it's synergic. Synergy stands for, you know, like 1 + 1 = 2. No, but synergy is if I said 1 + 1 = 10. That's synergy. When things start working and building on top of one another. It's kind of like a rising tide raises all ships. So St. John's wort can have much more of a high impact on depression, even with just a low dose of passion flower. So sometimes it's important to use medications appropriately and use them to your benefit. And last not least, something I recently came across, I guess it's existed for a while, I just didn't know about it, is something called force bathing. And it really excites me, especially because I'm from Vancouver, we live in British Columbia, and we've got trees and nature all around us, especially in Canada. I mean, we're so lucky to have all the nature that surrounds us. So my question is, have you ever heard of force bathing? Because in Japan, it is known as Shinrin Yoku. It is this practice of spending time in the woods for stress relief and relaxation. It's interesting that there's actually, I believe, like 73 accredited Shinrin Yoku forests in Japan that people in Japan go to with their families in order to unwind for the day. I mean, we do it all the time unknowingly. We notice our tension fade away when we bask in nature's beauty. But the interesting thing is now that science confirms that being in the outdoors is beneficial for our health. Why? Because all the plants and all the trees and everything, they release something called phytoncides, these volatile organic compounds that enhance our natural killer cell activity and expression of anti-cancer proteins. It's important for our immune system. And it's interesting to me because when I look back at some of the prescriptions given by our naturopathic forefathers, where it was like, open the windows in your house, get fresh air, get sunshine, connect with nature, you know, it's so interesting to see now that science is starting to confirm and sheds light onto the beneficial therapeutic outcomes of doing these things. So it's not just anecdotally anymore, but also scientifically. And I think it speaks a lot to that there's more than meets the eye when it comes to Mother Nature. I think there's lots that we can do for our anxiety and depression. I think it's, again, just really important to know what's out there and to have a choice. Many people feel like they don't have a choice. All they know is maybe one certain path or one certain drug or one certain treatment. And there might be a range of other treatments available for them, things that they can do themselves or things that they might take or things or treatment that might be done for them that can make a massive difference when it comes to anxiety and depression. And I think with that that's the end of the lecture. So I thank you guys so much for spending time, roughly on time. And I just appreciate all of you spending the time to listen to me. And I guess at this point, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to mention them.
Thank you so much for that talk. Just before we go to, we only have time for a couple questions now, but just want to let you know, info@aanmc.org is the email address that you can email if you do have any additional questions. We won't be able to get to things specific to the talk. However, we will be able to answer some generalized questions. And AANMC also has some upcoming events on May 18th. We have a webinar with an ND elder and clinical pearls there. And on May 31st, Stories from the Trenches, webinar with a current student from Best Year San Diego campus. And June 18th, we will be in person at the Health Professions Fair at the Minneapolis Hilton. For more information on those events, please visit aanmc.org/events. And so with that, I'm going to take just a couple questions here. Dr. Kefferputz, do you know of any link between celiac disease and anxiety and depression?
Well, I think there would be a link if you think about that. Celiac has an intolerance to gluten, and we know it's inflammatory. So it kills the brush border enzymes of your intestinal tract, which of course then means that you're not absorbing any of the nutrients, those building blocks that you need to actually produce the necessary neurochemicals to feel happy and to feel good and to feel at calm at ease. So I absolutely think there's a link to it.
There is a question in regards to the role of homeopathy, and I don't know if this is an area of expertise for you, but what about the role of homeopathy for depression?
Oh, you know what? Absolutely. I think that homeopathy has a role, especially when it's used for when it is used constitutionally for a person's expression of who they are. But to be honest, not my expertise, just like you mentioned, Joanne. I think there's a place for it, but I wouldn't know which exactly homeopathic remedies to use for a patient.
Okay, quick question about the herbs mentioned and safety either with breastfeeding and with children.
Mm-hmm. Well, definitely when it comes to breastfeeding and children, I would focus a little bit more on the nutritional aspects. So such as instead of maybe using St. John's wort, I use 5-hydroxytryptophan. I believe passion flower is safe when it's used for breastfeeding. This, especially I've seen this before in women when they have trouble sleeping during pregnancy and or when they're breastfeeding. So some of these herbs can be really appropriate for them. I know that passion flower is, I'm not sure about St. John's wort, especially because it has some impact on the liver enzymes.
Okay. Let's see, there are lots of questions that showed up and we only have a couple minutes. Do you have any preferred route of delivery for St. John's wort and passiflora?
Yeah, St. John. Well, I usually use a product called Neurapas by Pasco. It's a very well blended formulation that has passion flower, St. John's wort, and passion flower, St. John's wort, and valerian. But it's very important that the St. John's wort is usually encapsulated, not a tincture, not a liquid form, because the actual medicinal component for the antidepressant properties gets evaporated out of liquid proportions. So I usually use a capsulated form for St. John's wort.
Okay. So the question in regards to counseling and how you work with counselors as a naturopathic physician.
Yes, I think for some people, counseling is a very important component. Some people like to talk things through. Some people need to feel things through. So sometimes sometimes we use integrative body psychotherapy, which works on really allowing a person to get in touch with themselves. They actually do a lot more of the work, and me as a practitioner, I'm just there to facilitate. But for some people, talk therapy, especially cognitive behavioral therapy, plays a very important role. Again, it really speaks to what kind of patient is sitting across the room for you, right? Some people, they're very type A personalities. Some people, they're more feelers and they're a little bit more sensitive. Some people are much more analytical. So there's definitely a role for it. It's just important, again, to know what type of counseling to refer them to.
Okay, some foods that contain vitamin B12.
Vitamin B12. Yeah, no, that's a primarily meats. Primarily meats would contain vitamin B12. That's sometimes a tough thing for vegetarians, particularly. So I commonly suggest either vitamin B12 supplement or even more so just getting a vitamin B12 shot from your medical doctor or your naturopathic doctor, because that way you don't have to hassle with taking a bunch of pills. It's much easier that way.
Okay, we're right at the hour, and unfortunately, we just have time for a little bit more. Um, and for some of the questions that have come in regards to specific dosages as well as personal information, unfortunately, in a forum like this, Dr. Rigo is not able to, nor am I able to give individualized patient information. Uh, nor is it safe, honestly, for us to give dosages because you know things like, and I know you didn't talk about the toxicity of any of this, but there are drug herb and drug nutrient interactions and interactions with things like some of the SSRI and serotonin.
Absolutely.
So we're not able, unfortunately, to give any doses on uh, or any specific personal information. However, if you do want to see an ND yourself or find out more about this, you can always go to the accredited colleges of naturopathic medicine. All have student clinics, and if you're not located in one of those cities, there are physicians all over North America. Those can be found at the professional associations, either for the state and province or the country. And so that would be the next route if you were actually looking for a naturopathic physician yourself. Um, let's see. Okay. Uh, we've had a couple questions here as well. And Rigo, I'm just going to try and abridge some of this because we've got a whole lot of questions that came in and not too much time to answer them. So
Yeah,
we're
my
also,
apologies. That's
yeah,
my fault.
that's okay. There are some questions about antidepressants and switching. And I would say, as I'm sure you would probably agree, Rico, that any change in your medication needs to be covered with your naturopathic physician or your prescribing psychiatrist. And so we do not recommend changing any medication protocols if you have not yet consulted your physician. All of this is just informational only. And I just want
Yeah,
to make sure that
absolutely.
everybody here understands that we are not recommending any one specific protocol for anxiety or depression or any mood disorders here. Um, I'll leave one last question for you, Doc, and it's about glycemic index and sugar stability and how that impacts oxygen levels in the blood and brain, uh, as well as the general mood that you discussed.
Well, yeah, glycemic index is a really important component. When certain foods are high glycemic index, which means they impact the blood sugar very quickly, and certain foods that are low glycemic index, um, of course, I mean, every cell of our body needs sugar and it needs oxygen, and the blood circulation allows it to get to those cells. Like I mentioned, the blood sugar is a really important component that affects our brain. And if we're spiking our blood sugar, well, that has a huge impact on the way our brain tends to function. I'm not quite sure I understand the oxygen component in it, though.
Okay.
All
Well, I
good.
very much thank you for your time, and I thank you all for attending. Those of you who have asked questions, I will get to some of these. So if you want to hang out online briefly, I'll get to some of these questions individually. And those that I can't, Rigo, again, thank you so very much for your time. And that concludes our AANMC webinar.
Thank you very much, Joanne, Dr. Yanis. I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to share my wisdom and expertise. And thank you to all the viewers out there that took the time to listen to this.
Thank you again. Have a great
Take care.
day. Okay.
You too. Bye-bye.
So again, I will be answering questions. Please hang on if you've asked one.